Brakes are the most important safety feature on your car. They are what stop your car, keeping you safe. Bad brakes can be dangerous. Taking care of your brakes is important for your safety and the safety of others on the road. Regular brake maintenance keeps you safe and saves you money. By doing some easy checks and maintenance, you can make sure your brakes are always working their best. This guide will show you how to do some basic brake maintenance yourself. We'll cover checking and replacing brake pads and bleeding brake fluid. Remember, if you ever feel unsure about working on your brakes, it's always best to take your car to a trusted mechanic. You can easily check your brake pads without any tools. Just look through the spaces between the spokes of your wheel. You'll see the brake rotor, a shiny metal disc. On either side of the rotor, you'll see the brake pads. New brake pads are thick. As you use your brakes, the pads wear down and get thinner. If you see less than 1/4 inch of brake pad material, it's time to replace your brake pads. Some cars have wear indicators on the brake pads. A wear indicator is a small metal tab. When the brake pad gets thin, the wear indicator will touch the rotor and make a squealing sound. This sound means you need to replace your brake pads very soon. Don't ignore these signs. Driving with worn brake pads is dangerous. Changing brake pads is a job you can do yourself with a few basic tools. A jack and jack stands to lift the car safely. Never work under a car that is only supported by a jack. A lug wrench to loosen and tighten the lug nuts that hold the wheel on. A socket set and wrenches to remove the caliper bolts that hold the brake pads in place. A C-clamp to help you compress the caliper piston back into the caliper, which is necessary to install the new brake pads. Gloves to protect your hands from brake dust, which can be messy and harmful. And safety glasses to protect your eyes while working on your car. Having the right tools makes the job easier and safer. Before you begin, make sure you have all the tools you need. Now let's change those brake pads. First, park on a flat surface and make sure your car is in park or in gear if you have a manual transmission. Engage the parking brake for extra safety. Next, use the lug wrench to loosen the lug nuts on the wheel you'll be working on. Don't remove them completely yet. Place the jack under the designated jacking point for your car. Consult your owner's manual to find the correct location. Slowly raise the car until the tire is off the ground. Place jack stands under the car's frame for safety. Never work under a car that is only supported by a jack. Now that the car is safely supported, remove the lug nuts completely and take off the wheel. Locate the caliper and brake pads. The caliper is the metal housing that sits over the rotor. The brake pads are located inside the caliper. Use a socket or wrench to remove the caliper bolts. Once the bolts are removed, you can carefully lift the caliper off the rotor. The old brake pads will either come out with the caliper or be loose in the caliper bracket. Use the C-clamp to compress the caliper piston back into the caliper. This is necessary to make room for the new, thicker brake pads. Insert the new brake pads into the caliper bracket. Make sure they are seated correctly. Carefully lower the caliper back over the new brake pads and reinstall the caliper bolts. Tighten the bolts securely. Put the wheel back on and thread the lug nuts by hand. Use the jack to lower the car slightly, just enough to take the weight off the jack stands. Tighten the lug nuts in a star pattern using the lug wrench. Once the lug nuts are tight, lower the car completely and remove the jack and jack stands. Congratulations! You've successfully replaced your brake pads. Repeat this process on the other side of the car. After replacing your brake pads, it's important to bed them in. This means gradually applying the brakes from moderate speeds to help the new pads mate with the rotors properly. Section 5. The feel of fresh fluid. Why bleeding your brakes matters. Brake fluid is a special type of hydraulic fluid that transmits force from your brake pedal to the brakes themselves. Over time, brake fluid can absorb moisture from the air. This moisture can lower the boiling point of the brake fluid, making it less effective. Bleeding your brakes is the process of removing air and old fluid from the brake lines. This is important for two reasons: improved braking performance and preventing corrosion. Fresh brake fluid with a higher boiling point will resist brake fade, especially under hard braking. Moisture in the brake fluid can corrode brake lines and other components, leading to expensive repairs. You should bleed your brake fluid every 2 to 3 years or as recommended in your car's owner's manual. Section 6. Gathering your gear. Essential tools for bleeding brakes. Bleeding brakes requires a few specific tools. First, brake fluid. Make sure you use the correct type of brake fluid for your car. Consult your owner's manual for the correct specification. Next, clear tubing. You'll need a length of clear tubing that fits snugly over the bleeder valve on the caliper. Then, a wrench. Use a wrench that fits the bleeder valve on your car's calipers. Also, a container. Use a clear container to catch the old brake fluid as you bleed the brakes. A helper is also essential. Bleeding brakes is much easier with an assistant to help you. Don't forget gloves. Brake fluid is corrosive and can irritate skin, so wear gloves to protect your hands. Finally, safety glasses. Always wear safety glasses when working with brake fluid. Having the right tools makes the process smoother and safer. Always double check that you have everything before you start. Section 7. A smooth flow step-by-step brake bleeding process. Bleeding brakes is a straightforward process, but it's best done with a helper. Here's a step-by-step guide. First, locate the brake fluid reservoir. The reservoir is usually located near the firewall on the driver's side of the car. Clean any dirt or debris from the reservoir cap before opening it. Next, fill the reservoir with fresh brake fluid. Add enough brake fluid to bring the level to the max line. Then, determine the bleeding sequence. Consult your car's repair manual for the correct bleeding sequence. This ensures you bleed the brakes in the most effective order. After that, connect the tubing to the bleeder valve. Starting with the wheel farthest from the master cylinder, locate the bleeder valve on the brake caliper. Connect one end of the clear tubing to the bleeder valve and place the other end in the container. Now, have your helper press and hold the brake pedal. Your helper should press and hold the brake pedal firmly. Then, open the bleeder valve. While your helper is holding the brake pedal down, use the wrench to open the bleeder valve slightly. You'll see old brake fluid and air bubbles flowing through the tubing and into the container. Close the bleeder valve once the brake pedal is pressed to the floor. Close the bleeder valve before your helper releases the pedal. Repeat steps 5 to 7. Have your helper pump the brake pedal several times, then hold it down while you open the bleeder valve again. Repeat this process until you see fresh brake fluid with no air bubbles flowing through the tubing. Move to the next wheel. Once you've bled all the air from one wheel, move to the next wheel in the bleeding sequence and repeat the process. Check the fluid level regularly. Keep an eye on the brake fluid level in the reservoir and add more fluid as needed. Never let the reservoir run dry. Finally, test the brakes. After you've bled all 4 wheels, double check that the brake fluid reservoir is full. Then, start the car and test the brakes in a safe location. The brake pedal should feel firm and responsive. Remember, bleeding your brakes can be messy. Spread rags or cardboard under the car to catch any drips. Dispose of the old brake fluid properly at a hazardous waste facility. Section 8. Safety first. Precautions for brake maintenance. Working on your brakes involves inherent risks. Always prioritize safety by following these precautions. First, consult your owner's manual. Before starting any brake work, familiarize yourself with your car's specific brake system by consulting the owner's manual. Next, use the correct tools and parts. Always use the correct tools and parts designed for your car model. Using incorrect tools or parts can damage your brakes and compromise safety. Work in a well-ventilated area. Brake dust and fumes can be harmful if inhaled. Work in a well-ventilated area or outdoors to ensure proper ventilation. Never work under a car supported only by a jack. Always use jack stands to support the car securely when working underneath it. Never rely solely on a jack, as it can slip or fail. Wear safety gear. Protect yourself by wearing safety glasses, gloves, and appropriate clothing when working on your brakes. Dispose of fluids properly. Brake fluid is hazardous and should never be poured down the drain. Dispose of old brake fluid at a designated hazardous waste facility. If you encounter any difficulties or are unsure about a step, don't hesitate to seek assistance from a qualified mechanic. Section 9. Conclusion. Keeping your brakes in tip-top shape. Your brakes are your car's most important safety feature. Regular brake maintenance ensures optimal braking performance and keeps you safe on the road. By following the steps outlined in this guide, you can confidently perform basic brake maintenance tasks like checking and replacing brake pads and bleeding brake fluid. Remember to consult your car's owner's manual for specific instructions and recommendations for your vehicle model. If you're ever unsure about a procedure or encounter difficulties, don't hesitate to seek professional assistance from a qualified mechanic. By prioritizing brake maintenance, you're investing in your safety and the safety of others on the road. Drive safely. Drive